Welcome back to the daily Rambam class. We have moved on to the 8th volume of the Rambam, which deals with the Beis Hamikdash, or service in the temple. It is Thursday, so let us take a look at where we are up to in the Rambam. The Rambam had several works, and as mentioned multiple times, we are learning the Mishnah Torah, which is his most monumental halachic work. It has a total of 14 volumes. Baruch Hashem, with the help of Hashem, we are already onto volume number 8. Recently, we learned all agricultural law, which had also all the laws of when produce can be eaten and which produce needs to be brought to the Beis Hamikdash, etc. Now we move on to temple service. And as mentioned last week, our sages say that although we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, but by learning about the Beis Hamikdash, Hashem considers it as if we've actually involved in its service. And in the merit of learning about it, we hasten its rebuilding. So we certainly not just learning something of the past, but please God, also not something of the future, but something of the evident present. We are now in volume number 8. It's called Sefer Avodah, the Book of Service. This volume has 9 subjects, 9 topics, and 95 chapters. So that's going to take us approximately 3 months to work our way through the temple service. After that, the next volume has to do with other korbanos, other offerings that weren't covered in the temple service. If I remember correctly in the introduction, the Rambam said that in temple service he speaks about, I think, communal offerings, as opposed to the book of sacrifices, he deals with private offerings. We'll see when we get there. So that's a smaller section. And then that will conclude the offerings relating to the Beis Hamikdash. The next volume also has largely to do with the Beis Hamikdash because it's purity, but that also applies today because it speaks about the laws of mikveh and how a mikveh is used today. And we're pretty much at the beginning of our home run. Over the next 3 months, we're learning about the Beis Hamikdash, and then we'll learn about purity. I guess that's also quite a big one. I see it's 144 chapters. So that's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Okay, that's going to take us about 5 months. So that's really going to be a big one. So over the next 3 months, we'll learn about the Beis Hamikdash. And over the next 4 months, we'll learn about the Beis Hamikdash. And then over the next 5 months, we'll learn about purity. And from there, we come to real practical laws relating to today, damages, acquisitions, and then finally judgments and judges. And that concludes the entire Rambam. So just kind of seeing where we are up to in the picture, we're about halfway through. We're going to spend the next few months learning about the korbanos, and then another few months learning about the laws of purity, and then the final few months, the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, next 6 months or so, we'll learn about damages, acquisitions, judgments, and with that, we will eventually conclude the Rambam in approximately a year and a half from now. You'll be doing a fantastic job. Thank you for your incredible commitment. Let us take a look at volume number 8, Sefer Avodah. Okay, I guess so this is now the subject. Sorry, the format's not too great. I was just working on this now. It's a lot of material to put onto a single sheet. But these are the topics that we'll be covering over the next approximately 3 months. The first is we learn about the actual temple, the Beis Hamikdash. And today we'll be concluding that subject by speaking about guarding the Beis Hamikdash. Then we'll have about a week and a half learning about the utensils of the Beis Hamikdash. Then about another week and a half learning about entering the Beis Hamikdash, forbidden offerings, how offerings were brought, daily and added offerings, the daily offering, the Tamid and the Musaf, which was added on special occasions. And then things that are disqualified in the Beis Hamikdash, the service of Yom Kippur, and sacrilege if a person takes something holy and uses it for personal benefit. So this is a breakdown of what we will be learning about over the next 3 months. Within the book of temple service, we will be covering these 9 topics. But for today, let's conclude the first of those 9 topics, which is the Beis Hamikdash in general. Let's just glance upon, as we may have, I think we may have missed this last week, the beginning of every volume of the Rambam, he quotes a verse usually from Tehillim, and as the verse that he quotes for the book of Sefer Avodah, the book of temple service, is request the welfare of Jerusalem. May those who love you enjoy tranquility. So this obviously has to do with the welfare of Jerusalem, because we're talking about the temple in Jerusalem, and those who love you enjoy tranquility, talking about connecting with Hashem through the Beis Hamikdash. Let's take a look at today's Rambam. Okay. There's a positive mitzvah to guard the Beis Hamikdash, even if there's no fear of enemies or thieves. For the guarding of the temple is an expression of respect for it. A palace with the guards is much more impressive than a palace without guards. So those that are in the guards industry, we've got a couple of Yiddish companies here in South Africa. They will still be able to give their service to the Beis Hamikdash when Mashiach comes, and we won't need to worry about the not nice guys. Now, the mitzvah of guarding the Beis Hamikdash applies throughout the night. The Kohanim and Leviim should serve as the guards. So it's actually, you need to be pretty special in order to qualify to be a guard of the Beis Hamikdash. As the Torah says, and you and your sons shall be before the tent of the testimony, meaning you shall keep watch over it. Also the Torah says, and they, the Levites, shall watch over the tent of meeting. And the Torah says, and Moshe, Aaron, and his sons shall come before the sanctuary towards the east, and they will be the guardians of the holy watch. Shomer Mishmeres HaKodesh. Shomer is a guard. So this is the mitzvah. It applies even without any enemies. It's throughout the night, and it's for Kohanim and Leviim. Anyone who nullifies this watch transgresses a negative commandment, as the Torah says, and you shall take care to keep the holy watch. Any form of the verb shomer, which actually means to guard, implies a warning, make sure it's not violated. And that means it's a negative command. So whether the Torah says, do not steal, or the Torah says, guard yourself from stealing, they both constitute negative commands. In this instance, it doesn't say, do not nullify the guards, but it says, guard yourself from nullifying the guards. Shamor, so that makes it a negative command as well. A person, if there wasn't a guard, not only won't you be fulfilling the positive command, you'll be violating the negative command as well. Meaning that when you do guard, you're both fulfilling a positive mitzvah and a negative mitzvah. You're fulfilling, abstaining from a negative command. Now, the mitzvah of guarding the temple was as follows. The Kohanim stood guard from the inside, and the Leviim from the outside. There were 24 groups of guards that continuously stood watch over it. Each night in 24 different places. So there were 24 spots that needed to have guards. The priest stood guard in 3 places, the Kohanim in 3 places on the inside, and the Leviim 21 places on the outside. So where did they keep watch? The Kohanim kept watch in I'm sorry I don't have a diagram with me. Please God next time round, 3 years from now. The chamber of Avtidas, the chamber of the spark, and the chamber of the hearth. So 3 different chambers that were within the Beis Hamikdash. The chamber of Avtidas and the chamber of the spark were 2-story structures built at the sides of the gates of the temple courtyard, and the young priests kept watch there. The chamber of the hearth was a large domed structure surrounded on the inside with projections of stone. The elders of the priestly watch of that day slept there with the keys to the temple courtyard in their hands. So those are the three groups of guards, the Kohanim on the insides. Now, the priests that were on watch did not sleep in their priestly garments. Instead, they folded their priestly garments, placed them at their heads, and wore their own clothes. They slept on the ground. It is customary for all those who stand watch over the courtyards of kings not to sleep on beds. Interesting one. So they were allowed to sleep, but they had to sleep on the floor. If one of them had a seminal emission, which would make him impure, it actually would mean that he would not, it would be a problem to be in the Beis Hamikdash in the state of impurity. This happened while he was sleeping. Then he would proceed down the winding underground stairwell. Because the underground passageways that opened up to the portion of the Temple Mount were not consecrated. So he'd have this secret escape to a path that was not holy, and there he would go underground, under the mikveh, under the Beis Hamikdash there was a mikveh. He would go to mikveh and then return to his fellow priests, and so that nobody would know what happened. So that's quite amazing what was put into place so that he could secretly regain his purity without anybody even being aware of it, which probably is an amazing precedent to how today as well, be very careful that mikvahs that are built today are positioned in places that will enable those that need to go to be unnoticed by anybody. At that time, he would leave and proceed to his own affairs together with everybody else, so nobody would know the difference. So those were the three guards on the inside. What about the outside? So where would the Levium stand? So inside the 5 gates to the Temple Mount, okay, at its 4 corners of the wall surrounding the Temple Mount from the inside. So the 4 corners of the wall, so they're outside of the Beis Hamikdash, but inside of the wall. So that's right now we're holding at 9. Still. At the outside of the 4 corners of the temple courtyard, for it is forbidden to sit in the temple courtyard. So 4 on the inside, 4 on the outside. So we're at right now 8 and 5 is 13. And at the outside of 5 of the 7 gates to the temple courtyard, the priest stood watch at the remaining 2 gates. Oh, we said the Kohanim were by 2 of them, the chamber of the hearth and the gate of the spark. So 5 out of 7, because 2 of them the Kohanim did and the other 5 the Leviim did, a total of 18 locations. They also stood watch in the chamber of the sacrifices, the chamber of the Parayches, and behind the Holy of Holies, which equals a total of 21. Plus the 3 Kohanim is a total of 24. Now, an overseer was appointed over all of the watches of the guards, and he was called the officer of the Temple Mount. Ish Har Habayit. Throughout the night, he checked on all the watches. Torches were lit before him. So, what does this mean? Torches were lit before him? Tiferes Yisrael explains that the torches were not carried before him, but positioned as lights at the guard stations. And it seems like this might be the view of the Rambam as well. If a guard did not stand before him and greet him, saying, Ish Harabayis, Shalom Alecha, Mr. Harabayis, peace unto you. He would assume that the officer was sleeping and would strike him with his stick. Okay, now we know you're not allowed to enter the Beis Hamikdash with a stick. An exception was made for the Ish Harabayis, for Mr. Temple Mount. He was even granted permission to burn a sleeping guard's clothing. Wow. Although generally one may not destroy things of value, it's called Baal Tashlis. An exception is made in this case to allow the temple to be guarded properly. The officer of the Temple Mount could be authorized to destroy private property on the basis of the principle Hefker based in Hefker. A Jewish court may forfeit a person's ownership of an article. Now, this is one explanation. The Ezra's Kohanim doesn't accept this explanation because, again, we don't want to destroy things of value. Another explanation is that the step is taken for the watchman's own goods. Just like a father or teacher would be allowed to strike a student in order to shape his character. I don't know about the 21st century. Nowadays, I would be worried about such a educator if it's coming from the right place. But similarly, in this instance, says the Ezra's Kohanim, the officer of the Temple Mount was entitled to better watchman's clothing so that he will perform his task more effectively. This is actually discussed in a talk of the Rebbe in volume 18, page 465. So Mr. Harabayas, Isha Harabayas would make his rounds. He would hit or even burn the clothing of anybody that didn't stand up to greet him, indicating that they were sleeping. Thus it was commonly said in Jerusalem, "What is the noise in the temple courtyard? It must be the voice of a Levite being beaten and his clothes burned because he slept on his watch." Okay. Let's move along. In the morning, shortly before dawn, the overseer of the sanctuary, this Mr. Harabayas, came and tapped to awaken the priest sleeping in the chamber of the hearth. When they opened the gate for him, he took the keys and opened the small gate leading from the chamber of the hearth to the temple courtyard. Then he entered the courtyard and the priests followed him. They held 2 torches of fire in their hands and divided into 2 groups. One proceeded eastwards and the other westwards. They walked on, checking the entire temple courtyard. Both groups met when they reached the chamber of the bakers of the Chavitim. When both groups reached that point, they declared, "Peace be unto you. Everything is at peace. Shalom, hakol shalom." Afterwards, they prompted the bakers of the Chavitim to begin their work. This pattern was followed each night, except on Friday nights. Then they did not hold torches in their hands. Rather, they checked by the light of the candles which remained burning from before Shabbos. They had oil lamps on the sides of the walls, and they just sufficed with those lamps. So that's as far as the guards. Let's test your knowledge. Who serves as the guards of the temple? The priests, the Levites, or the Levites and the priests? Number 3, correct. Were the priests and guard permitted to sleep in their priestly clothes? Yes, they are obligated to. Yes, no, correct. What was done differently with the guarding process on Shabbos? They would not use torches, they would not lock the gates, or only the Levites would stand guard on Shabbos, correct. They would not use torches, as that is muktzah. And finally, at how many different occasions were the guards positioned? 24, 3, or 16? It was in 24 locations. Thank you so much for joining, and wishing you a wonderful Shabbos.